You're lying in bed and a memory surfaces. Something you said 3 weeks ago. Or maybe 3 years. The words you used, the look on the other person's face. And suddenly your body tightens. Your chest contracts. There's heat in your face, even though you're alone in the dark. You might close your eyes harder, as if that could make it go away. Or you might reach for your phone, looking for anything else to think about. This is familiar territory for most of us. This sudden arrival of something we wish we hadn't done, hadn't said, hadn't been. And what's interesting, if we can bear to look closely, is what happens next. Because shame doesn't just remind us of what occurred. It does something else. It builds a room around that memory, a room with very particular walls. Think of shame as a kind of weather system that moves through the body. When it arrives, it doesn't simply say, "That action caused harm." It says something much larger. It says, "You are the kind of person who does this. You are fundamentally flawed. You are, at your core, unacceptable." The Buddha spoke often about remorse, about the natural response of a clear mind recognizing unskillful action. He used a word, atapa, which means moral dread or conscience. This is the part of us that knows when we've moved away from care, away from wisdom. It's actually a guardian. It helps us see clearly, but shame is different. Shame doesn't guard, it buries. You can feel this difference in your body right now, if you're willing. Bring to mind something small you regret. Not your deepest wound, just something minor. Notice where you feel it. For many people, remorse lives in the chest, sometimes as a gentle ache, a tender spot that says, "I wish I had done better." It's specific. It points to an action. But shame drops lower. It settles in the gut, or it rises to close the throat. It spreads. It becomes you. The weather system of shame brings fog with it. In fog, you can't see clearly. You can't distinguish between what you did and who you are. And this matters enormously, because one of these things can change, and the other is a fiction. What you did exists in time. It happened. It had causes and conditions. You were tired or frightened, or you didn't yet understand something you understand now. The action arose from circumstances, from patterns, from the particular collision of your history and that moment. It can be acknowledged. It can be learned from. Sometimes it can be repaired. But who you are, this solid, permanent, defective self that shame insists on, this doesn't actually exist in the way shame claims. If you look closely at your experience, you won't find a fixed, unchanging core that is fundamentally bad. You'll find thoughts arising and passing, feelings moving through. Patterns, yes. Tendencies, absolutely. But not a solid thing that is ruined beyond remedy. The Buddha taught that clinging to a permanent self is one of the deepest sources of suffering. And shame is a particular kind of clinging. It clings to a story about yourself that feels absolutely true in the moment it arrives. The story says this is who you've always been, and this is who you'll always be. But if you can sit still with shame when it comes, if you can feel it in your body without immediately believing its story, something shifts. Not quickly, not dramatically, but you begin to notice that shame has a texture, a temperature, a location. It's a visitor in your experience, not the truth of your being. Right now, you might notice your breath, not to fix anything, not to push shame away, just to notice that breathing continues. Your chest rises and falls. Air moves in and out. This happens whether you're worthy or unworthy, whether you're acceptable or unacceptable. The breath doesn't wait for you to be good enough. It just breathes you. And in this simple observation, there's a crack in shame's logic. Because if you were truly the solid, defective thing shame says you are, nothing would change. But here you are, breathing. Here you are, capable of noticing. Here you are, aware of the difference between the story and the experience underneath it. This is where we begin, not with fixing yourself, not with becoming someone different, but with learning to recognize the difference between the clear-eyed acknowledgement of harm and the fog that says you are the harm. With learning to feel where each one lives in your body and what each one asks of you. There is a difference that lives in your body, and it is worth noticing. It is the difference between remorse and shame. They feel similar at first. Both arrive when you realize you have caused harm. Both carry weight, but one of them loosens with time and understanding, and the other hardens into something that feels like your permanent nature. Remorse is about what you did. It is specific. You spoke harshly to someone you care about. You made a promise and broke it. You acted from fear when you could have acted from kindness. The action is clear. The harm is real. And remorse, when it moves through you without resistance, is actually a sign that your conscience is alive. It is the mind recognizing a gap between your values and your behavior. The Buddha taught that a mistake acknowledged is a teacher. This is what he meant. The mistake itself becomes information. It shows you something about how you move in the world. And once you see it clearly, you can learn from it. Shame is different. Shame says, I am bad. Not I did something harmful, I am harmful. The mistake spreads through your entire sense of self like a drop of ink dissolving into water. You cannot find the edges of it anymore. You cannot point to the action and separate it from who you are. It colors everything, and because it has no boundaries, it feels permanent. It feels like the truth about you. This is the prison the Buddha spoke of, not the mistake itself. The prison is the belief that the mistake defines you. When shame takes hold, something protective happens. The mind tries to keep you safe by making the badness invisible. You might avoid the person you harmed. You might not speak about what happened. You might punish yourself in small ways throughout the day, as if suffering now could prevent worse suffering later. Or you might do the opposite and become numb, pushing the whole thing away so thoroughly that you do not have to feel it. But none of these moves actually address the harm. They just keep you locked in a relationship with it. Remorse, by contrast, can move. It can lead somewhere. It can lead to an apology that is genuine. It can lead to a change in how you act next time. It can lead to understanding why you did what you did. Was it fear? Exhaustion? A moment when you forgot what matters to you? Remorse is curious about these things. Shame just says you are bad, and bad people do bad things, so this proves it. The metaphor is worth holding for a moment. A stone placed in water remains distinct. You can see its shape. You can remove it. It does not dissolve into the water and taint everything, but a drop of ink spreads. It mingles with the whole. You cannot separate it out. You cannot find where it ends and the water begins. This is what happens when shame takes over. Your mistake becomes your identity. It mingles with every part of how you see yourself. But here is what is true. Your mistake is the stone, not the ink. It is specific. It has edges. It happened in time, in a particular moment, in a particular situation. It is not who you are. It is something you did. The difference lives in your body. This is where you can actually feel it if you pause long enough to notice. Bring to mind something you feel ashamed about. Not something small, something that still has weight. As you remember it, notice what happens. Where do you feel it? Does your chest tighten? Does your face warm? Does something in your belly clench? Does the feeling seem to spread? Does it touch other parts of how you see yourself? Notice if the feeling seems to say, I am bad, I am broken, I am unworthy. This is shame, it is total, it is about you. Now shift slightly, keep the memory, but change the thought. Instead of I am bad, try I did something harmful. I acted in a way that does not match my values. I caused pain. Notice what happens in your body with this shift. Often, the sensation becomes more localized. It is still there, it is still uncomfortable, but it is not spreading everywhere. It is not coloring your entire sense of self. It is sadness about a specific action. It is remorse. It is regret. These are different textures than shame. They are heavier in one place, not diffused throughout. Remorse can coexist with self-compassion. You did something harmful, and you are still worthy of kindness. You made a mistake, and you are still learning. This is not contradiction. It is accuracy. Shame cannot hold both things at once. Shame says if you are bad, you do not deserve kindness. You deserve punishment. But the truth that the Buddha pointed to is simpler than that. You are a human being who sometimes acts in ways that cause harm. This is not a stain on your soul. It is part of being alive. It is part of learning. And the moment you can feel the difference between what you did and who you are, something shifts. The mistake becomes workable. It becomes something you can look at, learn from, and move through. The practice is just this noticing. When shame arises, pause. Feel where it lives in your body. Listen to what it is saying about who you are. Then gently, without force, shift the language. What specifically did you do? Can you feel the difference? Can you sense how remorse is more precise, more bounded, more able to move? This is not about escaping the discomfort of having caused harm. It is about being with that discomfort in a way that does not turn it into a permanent identity. It is about letting the stone remain a stone, distinct and removable, rather than watching it dissolve into ink that colors everything. When something we have done causes harm, a feeling arises. It moves through the body like a wave. The chest tightens. There is heat in the face. Sometimes the belly clenches. This is remorse. It is real. It is not the enemy. But remorse has a twin, and the twin wears a convincing mask. We often cannot tell them apart. One twin says, I made a mistake. I see what happened. I will do differently. The other twin says, I am bad. I deserve to suffer. Only pain can prove I care. Only self-punishment can balance the scales. We treat them as the same thing. We call them both guilt. And because we cannot tell them apart, we begin to believe that the more we hurt ourselves, the more virtuous we become. We confuse accountability with self-destruction. We think that collapse is the same as change. Consider a gardener who walks through their garden one morning and notices a weed growing where vegetables should be. The gardener sees what happened. The soil was disturbed. A seed landed. The weed took root. What does the gardener do? They kneel down. They pull the weed out carefully, making sure to get the roots. They turn the soil. They tend to the bed. They water it. They plan what to plant next. The gardener does not burn down the entire garden. They do not stand in the ashes and say, I am a failure. I deserve this destruction. Only fire can prove I care about my garden. That would be absurd. And yet this is what we do when remorse becomes self-hatred. There is a teaching in the early tradition that speaks to this directly. It says, regret that leads to change is wise. Regret that leads to self-hatred is delusion wearing the mask of virtue. This is not a soft excuse. It is not saying do not feel bad. It is saying something much more precise. It is saying that there is a quality of remorse that opens toward repair, and there is a quality that closes toward collapse. One moves you toward the next right action. The other traps you in a story about who you are. When you harm someone, remorse is appropriate. It means you are not numb. It means you can still feel the impact of your actions on another person. That capacity is precious. But what happens next matters enormously. Does the remorse move you toward understanding what you did and why? Does it move you toward making amends where possible? Does it move you toward changing the behavior? Or does it move you toward self-flagellation, toward a kind of emotional self-punishment that actually keeps you locked in the same cycle? Notice the difference in texture. One kind of remorse has a quality of clarity. There is sadness, yes. There is the sting of seeing yourself clearly. But there is also a kind of steadiness underneath it. You can think. You can plan. You can take action. The remorse is sharp, but it does not paralyze you. The other kind has a quality of collapse. It is not clear. It is murky. It pulls you down into a story about your essential badness. It tells you that you are irredeemable, that you have always been this way, that this one action proves something permanent about who you are. This kind of remorse does not lead anywhere. It just circles. It feeds on itself. Here is what is subtle. The second kind often feels more virtuous. It feels like you are taking responsibility. It feels like you are suffering appropriately. It feels like you are proving something. But look more carefully. When you are in that collapse, can you actually help anyone? Can you actually repair the harm? Or are you too busy drowning in your own self-judgment to see the other person clearly? The gardener metaphor holds another truth here. When the gardener notices the weed, the gardener is not distracted by shame about the weed. The gardener does not stand there thinking, I am a bad gardener. I deserve to lose my garden. The gardener simply sees what is. The weed is there. That is a fact. What needs to happen next? That is the question. When you have acted in a way that caused harm, the same clarity is available to you. You do not need to construct an identity around it. You do not need to decide that you are fundamentally flawed. You can simply see, this action happened. This person was affected. What do I understand now that I did not understand before? What can I do to repair this? What can I do differently? This is where a simple question becomes useful. When remorse arises, when you feel that weight in your chest and that tightness in your belly, you can pause. You can ask yourself, does this feeling move me toward repair or toward collapse? Not in a harsh way, not as another test you might fail, simply as a gentle inquiry. Where is this remorse actually leading me? If it is leading you toward understanding and change, then let it do its work. Sit with it. Let it teach you. It is painful, but it is clean. It has direction. If it is leading you toward a spiral of self-hatred, toward a kind of emotional punishment that keeps you stuck, then you can notice that too. You can see this is not remorse anymore. This is something else. This is a story I am telling myself about who I am, and that story is not helping anyone, not me, not the person I harmed. In that moment of seeing the difference, something shifts. You are no longer trapped in the assumption that pain equals virtue. You are no longer burning down the garden to prove you care about it. You are simply tending to what is broken. You are simply moving toward repair. And that quiet, steady movement is where real accountability lives. There is a difference that the body knows before the mind does. You can feel it in the way a person sits, the way they breathe, the way they hold their shoulders. Shame and remorse are not the same, though we often use the words as if they were. One closes you down, the other opens you toward what happened. Shame is a contraction. It moves inward and downward, Like a flower closing at the first sign of cold, the petals fold, the stem bends, everything pulls away from the light. When shame lives in you, there is an impulse to disappear, not just from others, but from yourself, to become small, to hide. The body curls forward, the breath becomes shallow. You might notice your chest tightening, your throat closing, a heaviness in your belly that feels like it could swallow everything. Shame says, I am bad. Not I did something that caused harm, but I am fundamentally wrong. Remorse is different. Remorse is what happens when you have done something that goes against your own values, and you feel the weight of that clearly. But remorse does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to stand with what you have done. A tree bends in the wind, it yields, but its roots stay planted. It does not try to become invisible. It faces the storm. In Zen practice, there is a simple teaching: the body never lies. You cannot think your way into understanding the difference between shame and remorse. You have to feel it. You have to notice where each one lives in your flesh. Shame often settles in the chest as a tightness, a weight that presses inward. Or it may live in the throat, making it hard to speak, hard to be seen. Some people feel it as a burning in the face, a heat that makes them want to look away. Others find it in the belly, a kind of collapse, a loss of ground. The location varies, but the quality is always the same: contraction, hiding, the body saying no. Remorse has a different signature. When you truly face what you have done, not to punish yourself, but to understand, the body can remain open. There may be sadness, there may be a weight, but it is not the weight of hiding. It is the weight of responsibility, which is different. Responsibility can be carried. It does not require you to disappear. The difference matters because shame does not lead to change. Shame leads to more shame. It leads to defensiveness, to self-punishment, to the kind of suffering that feeds on itself and produces nothing but more suffering. When you are lost in shame, you cannot see clearly what you did or why. You are too busy trying to escape yourself. Remorse, on the other hand, allows you to look. It allows you to understand. It opens the possibility of genuine change, not because you are bad and must become good, but because you are human and you can learn. This is why the body matters. Your mind can convince itself of almost anything. It can rationalize, it can twist. But your body knows. Your body does not lie. When shame is present, you will feel the closing. When remorse is present, you will feel something else, a steadiness even in sadness, a willingness to stay present. The practice is simple, though it requires gentleness with yourself. It begins with noticing. In a quiet moment, bring to mind something you feel ashamed of. Not something you have worked through completely, but something that still carries a charge. Something that makes you want to look away. As you hold this in your awareness, notice what happens in your body. Does your chest tighten? Does your throat close? Does your belly collapse? Where is the contraction? There is no right answer. Everyone's body speaks its own language. You are simply learning to listen. Once you have located the shame, and it may be in more than one place, you can begin to breathe into that space. Not to fix it, not to make it go away, simply to breathe with it, to acknowledge it, to stay present with the contraction rather than running from it. As you breathe, you might notice something beginning to shift. Not because you are doing anything to force the shift, but because the simple act of turning toward the contraction with kindness begins to change its quality. You are no longer fighting it. You are no longer hiding from it. You are simply present with it. Continue breathing into this place for several cycles. There is no goal. There is no endpoint. where you will suddenly feel better. You are simply practicing the act of staying present with what is difficult, of not abandoning yourself when things feel uncomfortable. As you breathe, you may begin to feel a subtle difference. The contraction may soften slightly, or it may not. Either way, something is changing. You are learning to be present with yourself. You are learning that you can feel shame and still remain upright. You can acknowledge what you have done and still not disappear. This is the practice. This is how the body begins to teach you the difference between the closing of shame and the steadiness of remorse. Not through words or ideas, but through direct experience, through breath, through the simple act of turning toward yourself with gentleness instead of turning away. When shame arrives, it comes with a voice that sounds like truth. It whispers that you are fundamentally broken, not that you did something wrong. That would be different, easier to hold. Shame says that you are wrong, that something inside you is irredeemable, separate from all goodness, beyond repair. It is a voice that feels certain, and because it feels so certain, we often believe it without question. This is where we need to pause and look carefully at what is actually happening. Remorse is different. Remorse is the honest acknowledgement that you acted in a way that caused harm, to yourself or to another. It is painful, yes, but it is clean. It points outward and backward. It says, I did this, and I see what came from it. Remorse can lead somewhere. It can lead to change, to apology, to a different choice next time. Remorse is rooted in clarity. Shame, by contrast, points inward and downward. It collapses you into a single story about who you are. It does not ask you to change your actions. It asks you to change your identity, to believe that you are the mistake, the failure, the unworthy one. And from that place, nothing can really change, because the problem is not what you did. The problem, shame insists, is what you are. This is the trap. And it is worth examining because many of us live in this trap for years, sometimes for a lifetime. The teaching that meets this directly comes from a deep place in Buddhist understanding. It says something that shame will never tell you. No being is beyond the reach of compassion, including yourself. Not because you deserve it, not because you have earned it, but because compassion is not something that is withheld from the broken. Compassion is what recognizes that nothing in this world is broken in the way shame claims. The Buddha nature, the capacity for wisdom, clarity, and kindness that is present in every being, is never destroyed. It is only obscured, and there is a difference. When something is destroyed, it is gone. When something is obscured, it is still there, waiting. Think of clouds covering the sun. The clouds are real. They are thick, they block the light, they make the day feel dark. A person standing beneath them might genuinely believe the sun is gone. The darkness is undeniable. But the sun has not been damaged. It has not become less bright. It is simply not visible right now. The clouds do not change the sun. They only change what we can see. Your Buddha nature works the same way. Shame, guilt, confusion, the weight of past actions. These are real clouds. They obscure the light. They make it hard to sense anything good in yourself. But they do not change what is fundamentally there. They do not damage your capacity for wisdom or kindness. They only block the view temporarily. And here is what matters: clouds move. They always move. Nothing stays fixed. This is not a promise that shame will disappear tomorrow. It is something quieter and more true. It is the recognition that shame, like all experiences, is impermanent. It arises, it peaks, it passes. And in the spaces where it passes, something else becomes visible. But to rest in this understanding, we need to do something that shame will resist. We need to question the identity that shame is trying to cement. Shame says, "I am broken." It speaks with such certainty that we accept the statement as fact. We build our life around it. We make decisions based on it. We keep ourselves small to protect others from our brokenness. What if you paused at that moment? Not to argue with shame, not to try to convince yourself that you are good, but simply to ask a different question. Not, "Am I broken?" but "Who is aware of this thought that I am broken?" There is something in you that can observe shame. There is an awareness that can notice the thought, the feeling, the story. That awareness is not the same as the shame. It is separate from it. It is not broken. It is simply aware. When you rest in that awareness, you are not denying what happened. You are not pretending the clouds are not there. You are simply shifting where your attention rests. Instead of being inside the cloud, looking outward at a dark world, you are resting in the sky itself, the space in which clouds arise and pass. This is not a technique to fix yourself. It is not a tool to make shame go away. It is simply a way of relating to shame differently. A way of not believing that shame's story about who you are is the final word. A way of letting your attention rest in the awareness that can hold shame without becoming it. When you notice shame rising, there is a moment, sometimes very brief, where you can feel the thought forming. I am broken. In that moment, you might simply pause and ask, who knows this thought? Who is aware that this voice is speaking? And then, without forcing anything, let your attention rest there, in that awareness itself. Not in the content of the story, not in the clouds, but in the space where the clouds are moving. There is a peculiar form of suffering that many of us know well. It arrives after we have done something we regret. We said something harsh. We forgot to show up. We chose ourselves when someone needed us. And in that moment of recognition, something hardens inside. This hardening has a name. It is shame. And shame does something very particular. It does not simply say, "You made a mistake." Shame says something far more dangerous. It says, "You are the mistake." And because you are flawed at your core, there is no point in trying to repair what you have broken. This is where many of us get stuck. We know we should apologize. We know we should reach out. We know we should try to make things right. But shame whispers a convincing argument. It tells us we do not deserve to try, that our attempt would be false, that the other person would see through it, that we are too far gone for repair to matter, and so we do nothing. We carry the weight of what we did not say, what we did not do, what we did not attempt. The regret deepens, the distance grows, and shame feeds on our inaction, becoming stronger with each day we remain silent. There is a teaching from the Buddha that speaks directly to this moment. It is not complicated. It says simply that the path is walked by taking the next step, not by being worthy of the path. This is not a metaphor about worthiness in some distant future. It is about now. The path does not require you to be perfect before you step onto it. It requires only that you step. Think of a broken bowl, a ceramic vessel that has been dropped or struck, and now it lies in pieces on the floor. In the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, such bowls are not thrown away. They are gathered. The pieces are fitted back together, and the cracks are sealed with gold. When the work is finished, the bowl is whole again, but it is not the same bowl. It is marked by its fracture. The gold runs through it like veins, and this bowl, with its visible repair, is often considered more beautiful than it ever was before. The repair does not erase what happened. The break is still visible. But the break becomes part of the bowl's history. It becomes part of what makes the bowl precious. This is what shame prevents us from understanding. Shame tells us that a break cannot be repaired, that once we are fractured, we are ruined, that the only honest response is to hide the damage or discard ourselves entirely. But this is not true. A life can be broken and repaired. A relationship can be fractured and mended. And the mending, when it comes, does not erase the fracture. It honors it. The difference between healthy remorse and self-destruction is this. Healthy remorse looks at what happened and says, I caused harm. I can see it clearly. And because I can see it, I can respond to it. Self-destruction looks at what happened and says, I caused harm. I am therefore unworthy, and because I am unworthy, I will do nothing. One of these moves toward repair, the other moves away. When shame has its hooks in us, we often cannot feel the difference. They feel very similar. Both involve pain. Both involve a sense that something is wrong. But one is the pain of honest seeing. The other is the pain of hiding. The honest seeing is not comfortable. It asks us to acknowledge what we did without softening it. It asks us to feel the impact of our actions on another person. It asks us to sit with the knowledge that we caused pain. This is difficult. But it is clean, it is clear. It does not add another layer of deception on top of the original harm. The hiding is quieter at first, but it festers. It becomes a secret we carry. It becomes a reason to avoid the person we hurt. It becomes a wall between us and anyone who might know what we did. And over time, the hiding becomes as much of a burden as the original mistake. Now, there is something worth noticing here. When shame tells us we do not deserve to try, it is often speaking to a real fear. The fear that our attempt will be rejected, that we will be seen as false, that the other person will not accept our apology or our effort. This fear is not entirely without basis. Sometimes people do not accept apologies. Sometimes our attempts at repair are not welcomed, but shame uses this possibility to paralyze us completely. It says, because repair might be rejected, you should not attempt it. This is like saying, because a seed might not grow, you should not plant it. The path does not require that your repair be accepted. It requires only that you make the attempt with sincerity. It requires that you take the next step. So now, I invite you to think of something small, not a grand gesture or a complete reconciliation. Something small enough that you could do it today. An apology you have been carrying. A correction you could make. A kind word you could offer to someone you have hurt or neglected. As you think of this, notice what arises. Notice the resistance. Notice the voice that says you do not deserve to try, or that it would not matter, or that it is too late. Do not push the resistance away. Do not try to overcome it through force of will. Simply notice it. See it clearly, the way you might see a cloud passing through the sky. And then notice something else. Notice that beneath the resistance, there is a possibility. A small, quiet possibility that you could take this step, not because you are worthy, not because you are healed, but because the path is walked by taking the next step, not by being worthy of the path. When shame arrives, it often feels like the most solid thing in the world, like something true about you, like proof. The weight of it can be so convincing that you forget it is a weather system moving through the sky of your awareness. You forget that the sky itself, the vastness in which all of this is happening, remains untouched. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Shame has a particular texture. It wants to collapse you inward. It whispers that you are what you did, that you are the mistake, that you are fundamentally wrong. And because shame feels so personal, so intimate, so about you, it is easy to believe that it is you, that it is permanent, that it defines the ground you stand on. But there is something the early teachings point toward again and again. This too is not mine, not me, not what I am. It arises and it passes. When you look closely at shame, without trying to fix it or escape it, you begin to notice something. Shame is not a solid thing. It has texture, yes, it has weight, but it also has edges. It comes, it peaks, it shifts. Sometimes it is sharp, and sometimes it is dull. Sometimes it is accompanied by a tightness in the chest, sometimes by a heaviness in the belly, sometimes by a story that loops and loops. But none of these are permanent. None of them are you. The confusion begins when we do not make this distinction. We do not separate the weather from the sky. A storm moves through the atmosphere, and we say the sky itself has become dark. But the sky has not changed. The vastness is still there. The openness is still there. The storm is temporary. The sky is not. This matters because there is a difference between remorse and shame. Remorse is what remains when you see clearly that something you did caused harm. Remorse is clean. It is a natural response to seeing impact. It can motivate genuine change. It does not need you to collapse into yourself. It does not need you to believe you are fundamentally broken. Shame, on the other hand, is the storm. It is the belief that the harm you caused proves something essential about who you are. It is the confusion of the weather with the sky. And when you live inside that confusion, when you believe that the storm is you, then shame becomes self-destructive. It becomes a way of punishing yourself, a way of saying, I deserve to suffer because I am suffering. I am bad because I feel bad. But look at what happens when you remember that shame is impermanent. When you remember that it arises and it passes. When you remember that it is not the deepest truth about you. You might sit quietly and notice the shame present. You might feel it in your body. You might hear the stories it tells. And instead of either drowning in it or trying to push it away, you might simply let it be there, like weather, like clouds moving across the sky. The clouds do not need you to believe they are the sky. They do not need you to make them permanent. They do not need you to fight them or cling to them. They are just moving through. When you sit this way, something begins to shift. Not because you are doing something special, not because you are practicing hard, but because you are finally seeing what is actually true. The shame is real, the feeling is real, but it is not permanent, and it is not you. This is not the same as dismissing what you did. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is actually the opposite. When you are not collapsed into shame, when you are not using shame as a weapon against yourself, you are more able to see clearly what happened. You are more able to feel genuine remorse. You are more able to make different choices going forward. You are more able to offer repair if repair is possible. But as long as shame has convinced you that the harm you caused, you are stuck. You are defending yourself against yourself. You are at war with the weather. So there is an invitation here. The next time shame arrives, and it will, you might try something simple. You might sit with it, not to make it go away, not to fix yourself, but just to watch, to notice where you feel it, to notice how it changes moment to moment, to notice the stories it tells, and underneath all of that, to notice the awareness itself, the space in which all of this is moving, the sky. You might notice that even as the shame is present, there is still breathing happening. There is still sensation. There is still the simple fact of being alive in this moment. The storm is real. But it is not all that is real, and it is not you. This is not something to believe. This is something to discover for yourself, slowly, in the quiet, in the sitting, in the returning again and again to what is actually here, rather than what the shame is telling you about who you are. When you notice shame arising now, you might find that something has shifted. Not because you've conquered anything or fixed yourself, but because you've begun to see the difference between a mind that learns and a mind that attacks itself. Healthy remorse says, I see what happened. I feel the weight of it. What can I understand here? It moves toward repair, toward clarity, toward the people or situations that were affected. It doesn't linger in the wound. It acknowledges and then asks what comes next. Shame says, I am the wound. It collapses the action into your identity. It tells you that what you did reveals something essentially broken in you, something that cannot be mended. And then it keeps you there circling, because if you are fundamentally flawed, there's nowhere to go. No learning can touch you. No amends can reach deep enough. But you've been practicing something different. You've been learning to pause when that familiar contraction happens in your chest or throat. You've been noticing the thoughts that come with it, the stories that want to take over. And instead of believing them immediately, you've been asking, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this the voice of wisdom? Or is this the voice of an old pattern trying to protect me by keeping me small? The Buddha taught that clinging to a fixed sense of self causes suffering. Shame is one of the most painful forms of that clinging. It insists that you are a solid, unchanging thing, and that thing is bad. But when you look closely at your actual experience, you see that you are not a single fixed entity. You are a process. Thoughts arise and pass. Feelings arise and pass. Actions arise from conditions, and those conditions are always shifting. This doesn't mean you're not responsible. It means responsibility becomes something workable. You can meet what you've done with honesty. You can feel the appropriate pain of having caused harm. You can make amends where amends are possible, and you can learn. You can change. Because you are not a statue. You are alive, and life moves. When shame tries to convince you otherwise, you can come back to the body. The body doesn't hold concepts about your worth. It simply breathes. It simply feels. The tightness in your shoulders, the heat in your face, the heaviness in your stomach, these are sensations. They are real, but they are not verdicts. They are the body processing something difficult, and they will shift if you let them. You don't have to push them away. You don't have to drown in them either. You can place your attention on the feeling of your breath moving in and out. You can notice where your body makes contact with the surface beneath you. You can feel your feet on the ground. These simple acts of attention bring you back to what is actually happening right now, instead of the story shame wants to tell about who you are forever. This is the practice. Not perfection. Not the end of difficult feelings. Just the willingness to meet yourself with the same kindness you would offer to anyone else who is struggling and trying to learn. If you've found something useful here, you might continue exploring these ideas in another video. There's no rush. The path is long, and it unfolds one step at a time. But if you'd like to go further into the practices of self, compassion, or the nature of identity, those threads are there when you're ready. For now, let yourself rest. Let the ideas settle. You don't need to hold onto them tightly. They'll be there when you need them. Bring your attention back to your breathing. Notice the coolness of the air as it enters. Notice the warmth as it leaves. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest or belly. There's nothing you need to do with this breath. It's already happening. It's already enough. Let your body soften where it can. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. You are here. You are breathing. And in this moment, that is all that's asked of you.